Good morning. It is Tuesday. It is time for Ask Me Anything, and I'm super excited because if you guys don't know and you're tuning in for the first time this week, we are actually in the middle of a series called Scaling Your Brand in Your Business in 2017. So just to give a little bit of background for everybody, I am really at a point where I started putting systems and structures in place in my business as a one-person business to just explode in 2017, and I'm going through this process for myself with the help of wonderful experts, and I decided to document the whole entire series and put it out there for you guys so you could learn how to do it for your business as I go along too. So that being said, today I'm joined by Matt Braylove. He is my accountant, but really more than that, he's a fantastic business advisor, an incredible networker, and just has a mind for scaling and growing business in such a smart way. And I cannot say how excited I am to share his knowledge with you guys. I mean, he typically charges me for this advice, so I'm just elated that he's on the show.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you for those very kind words.
Yes. So do you want to give a little bit of background about yourself?
Would love to. So, very candidly, Kate and I have a very great client-accountant relationship. And the reason why Kate and I are very good together is because Kate exemplifies exactly what I look for in a client. So I'm a business and tax advisor for clients. And what does that mean? Well, there's no real magic to it. What it is I'm a math teacher for your business. So math teacher, right? I help you learn your numbers. I help your numbers work for you. And I help you feel better about the process as you go through it. Kate is great for that because Kate, besides being an excellent businesswoman, she's a great learner at the same time. And I think that's really the key to it is being willing to know what you know and admit what you don't know, and it makes a great relationship when the advisor and the client can do that. So that's what I do.
And I am the first to admit I don't know a lot about accounting, so I'm happy that Matt is involved. So I think the first natural place to start, and we talk about this a lot, and where I really came up against with my business, and I know you guys out there have expressed that you're dealing with this too, is I've gotten to a point where, fortunately, the demand for my business increased, and my hourly rate, I don't think, was cutting it. So the first way, of course, to elevate your brand and scale your business is to go ahead and bump up your rates. But let's just start with the just standard question. How do you even determine your rates? How do you determine what your hourly rate is? How do you determine, if you're creating packages, what your packaging rate should be so it makes sense for your business but is also competitive in the market?
And that's a great topic. I think for most people, the mistake they make is they go ahead and say, how much should I charge? They look at their competition and they say, my competition charges $100 an hour, I'm going to charge $100 an hour. Well, here's the problem with that. One, I would venture to say most people who are starting a business didn't go into business to be their competition, right? You didn't start this because you're just as good or just as average. You knew something that you could do a little bit better, a little bit different in a way that captured the market in a better way for you. So yes, you want to be aware of your competition and their pricing, but don't lock yourself into what they are. Use them as guidance. But so really when you're thinking about it, your hourly rate should be made up a couple different ways. One, you need to think about what is your background, what is your expertise, what is your skill set. So you have to be reasonable for what you're charging. But reasonable has a pretty wide range. So if you have, whether it's a college education or on-the-job training, it's something that really sets you apart, that increases your value. If you're day one to a job and you haven't done this before, your hourly rate is probably not going to be premium because you haven't proven that you're a premium provider yet. So background is one component of it. The other component is experience. And a lot of people really miss out on this. You can deliver the same service as your competition. You can go out and be the best consultant, the best advisor, the best whatever you are. The problem is if you're delivering it the same exact way they are, you're going to really haven't differentiated yourself. So how do you differentiate yourself? Well, we know most of you out there are probably delivering premium service at the same time you're giving a premium product or consulting advice. So when you set your price point, keep in mind if your experience is higher than that on part of somebody else, if you're higher than your competition in experience, set your price point higher than them for that. The other thing, and this is really the fun part of the job, those are the two givens, right? What is your competition doing? What do you do better than them? Really, I say it's backwards math. So here's the fun exercise. How much money do you want to make in a year, right? So there's really no secret. If you want to make $100,000 a year, how many hours do you want to work to get the $100,000? Well, you do the backwards math. Now, it's not as easy as just saying A times B equals C, because there's cost to everything you do. So the time that you're working, you can get paid for. But how do you define that working time? Working time is more than just sitting down with a client and delivering a service. Your working time is identifying a prospect, working on your brand, doing the administrative back office things. So for every hour you're in there with a client or selling a product or delivering some type of service, there's probably at least another hour or even 2 hours of back office or administrative support to get to that point. So you need to figure if I want to make $100,000 a year, and I figure I need to work, I charge premium pricing and I figure out how many hours I want to do for that to get to that number, I need to up my rate to account for the time that I'm not sitting in front of a client or actually selling a product to my client. So that's the part that a lot of people miss is, yes, if I'm sitting down with you and I say, okay, my rate is going to be, and let's make something up for the conversation, my rate's $200 an hour. That's great if I can bill 40 hours a week, 50 hours a week, 60 hours a week doing this, but I can't, right? Because in order to get to the moment where I'm meeting with you, I need to prepare for a meeting with you. I need to then take the information that we're having in that meeting, sit back down and digest it, and translate it into some action item for you or on your behalf. So for every time I'm in front of you, there's more time that I'm not sitting here billing. So when you're factoring your pricing, that's really the starting point. What is your competition charging? That gives you at least a baseline or more reasonable. Am I providing a service or product that is higher or maybe it's lower than your competition? You need to be aware of that. And 3, what number do I want to get? How many hours do I want to work to get there? And do the math to make that work. The answer is no, you can't go in, if your competition is charging $200 an hour, you can't charge $1,000 an hour unless you can justify it. Well, here's the part that people really struggle with. You need to believe the number. So if I go out and I tell you my rate's $100 an hour, well, that's believable for being a CPA with my experience. If I tell you my rate's $1,000 an hour, I'm going to laugh at that. If I can't believe that, my client can't believe that. So make sure you're comfortable that when you present it, it feels natural for you. And if it doesn't feel natural for you, bounce it off of people. Go sit down with peer groups, sit down with other people in your industry, sit down with friends, go to your parents, ask them, if I were to propose these services for this price point, does that feel comfortable to you? And if the answer is no, then you need to go back to the table and look at it again.
And I do want to touch on something because I know I struggle with this, and you said something to me really early on in business that resonated with me, which was we have a tendency, at least consultants, from my perspective, to be very, very on top of only billing for the exact hours that we worked. And earlier on in my career, you actually said to me, what could take somebody else an hour to find the answer probably takes you, because your natural expertise in this topic, 5 minutes. Therefore, should you be charging significantly less than the person it takes an hour to find out the answer to? And it was such it was so simple, but to me it was such a shock, because if you can figure out things, so often I feel like we underestimate our own natural talents and experience, and we feel we have to work twice as much to almost justify the rate. But the fact of the matter is, there are people out there, and it would take them twice, 3 times as long as it would you to come up with the same exact thing. So don't discount yourself when you're thinking about your rate and the value that you provide, when you're looking at it just in terms of an hours in type of perspective, because that person may be charging $100 an hour and can get the answer in an hour. You might be charging the same, but the value is still the same, even if it takes you significantly less, and that's why you're an expert.
Right, and the key to that, be careful on how you're locking yourself into your pricing agreement. So tell people what your hourly rate is, but don't tell them you're charging by the hour for every project. I think this is going to progress into some of the rest of our conversation. Your pricing doesn't mean if you spend 5 minutes, like you said, you can bill them full freight for what you're doing, because you provided the same value as a counterpart that may have taken longer. But if your agreement says, I will only bill you by the hour and only for time incurred, there's no way that you're obligated to capture only those times. So make sure that your agreement has flexibility that I'm going to provide this service, and when we're in a consulting nature, when I'm sitting down one-on-one, I'm going to bill you my hourly rate. But when I'm providing you a product, and the product might be your service that comes out of that relationship, it's not necessarily it's what's the value of the product I'm providing.
Perfect. So to your point, that leads into another wonderful conversation, which admittedly, even as I grew my business, I really struggled with, which is coming up with payment terms. And I will say what was there for me, if I can be so honest, I would almost get nervous to demand payment up front to book time. But then sometimes I'd be in situations where I was chasing clients down. And I think that a lot of people have this thing of they don't want to be too presumptuous and scare people off, yet they also don't want to spend all of their time collecting payments and being a bookkeeper when they just want to focus on what it is that they do best. Let's talk about payment agreements, payment structures, figuring out ones that work for you so again, you can feel comfortable with it and your clients can too. What do you typically advise folks in that nature?
Right, and so that's a great question. There is no right answer to this. For what works in your business may not work in my business. The key to coming up with payment structure is figure out what your negotiables are and your non-negotiables. So for example, some people say, I will not provide a service or a product unless I get paid in advance. Well, if that's a non-negotiable, never break that rule. However, in the real world, we know that things happen. Good clients have bad months, and sometimes they can't pay you up front. But you know they're a good client, and you're going to want to work with them. So be willing to break your own rule, but if you don't have a rule, there is no rule to break. So you and I have talked about this before. When you set the rules, you have control over the pricing and over the timing of payment. When you don't provide the rule, you allow your client the opportunity to provide that rule for you. And I can guarantee you their rule will never be as favorable for you as it is for them. So when you're thinking about payment terms, don't be afraid to break the mold. So a lot of service providers say, I need to provide the service, send an invoice, wait 30 days, hope that they pay me, call them, remind them to pay me, threaten a service charge or a finance charge for not making payment on time, and then hope that they pay me that next month, and then I'm too afraid to pull the trigger to put the finance charge on there. And I tell you, everybody, flip the model a little bit. Think about the last time you went into Staples, Office Depot, Target. You walked in, you knew you wanted a product. You walked out, they didn't let you just walk out and say, I'm gonna pay you in 30 days. They made you go to a cash register, swipe your credit card, write a check, give them cash. The understanding in the retail industry is you don't get a product, which is their service, without paying for it up front. That should be no different in the service industry if that's what you want for your business. Now the difference is you can't go into a meeting and tell people, pay me up front, expect them to pay you and walk out with a good feeling if you haven't created the right expectation. So payment terms really have nothing to do with getting paid. People fool themselves into thinking if I write an invoice and it says, pay me net 30 and I'm gonna put a 15% finance charge, all of a sudden in 30 days I'm gonna have a payment. The answer is the only way you can guarantee payment is if you can guarantee expectations. And how do you guarantee expectations? You guarantee it by setting those up front. So it really starts long before you provide that service or the product. It starts when somebody calls you and whether it's talking to you or to your assistant or somebody in your office, your salesperson, when you're talking about what type of service or product you can provide, you need to talk about the terms in which the entire engagement is going to work within. So some of that might be, we provide the following services. Our first meeting is complimentary. Every meeting after that is $150 an hour, but for that $150, payment is due upon the close of that meeting. Now, if you say that, there's never a false expectation when the person walks out the door that they shouldn't be prepared to pay you on the spot. If you don't say that, you walk out having that awkward feeling of, do I mention payment now? Do I tell them I'm going to invoice them later?
Right.
And that creates this confusion not only for the client, but more importantly for you. And the whole tone of this conversation is how do you create efficiency in your business and how to get paid? Well, every time you have to wonder, how am I going to have that conversation? When am I going to have the conversation? What am I going to say during that conversation? You've cost yourself valuable time in working on your next client.
True, right, because it lingers and then it impacts your ability to move into other things. And who wants that hanging over their head anyways?
Right.
Right.
And so really the takeaway for here is don't be afraid to create any payment term that works for your business, but make sure you're clearly communicating that ahead of time. So there is no wrong answer. I had a client the other day telling me a story. The client sent out an invoice to one of her customers and it was payable in 10 days. She was really, really, really proud of herself because she got paid in that first 10 days. So she did that same model for customer number 2. Pay me in 10 days. Still waiting on payment, and we are far beyond 10 days. The reality is that customer 1 was willing to pay it, probably not because it had a number 10 on there or 30 days or pay me within 60 days, but because the experience was so good and the person felt value for what they were getting. So at the end of the day, the number on the invoice or when you're asking for payment doesn't drive the conversation. The expectation, the communication, and the experience drives when you're getting paid.
And I think that's a good point too when you're looking at just all of this as a factor of branding, right? Like the experience, even down to how they can pay you, is a factor of your brand. And when you look at making yourself more premium and you really want to elevate your brand, pricing structure should be reflective of that. So having to say to somebody or wanting to say to somebody, you cannot solidify my time until you book pay and handle all of that is a fabulous way to make yourself more exclusive and almost justify higher rates. If you have insanely high rates, but then you're really just lax on the payment terms, there's a bit of a disconnect with setting that expectation and that position, I think, of your brand. So all of this is definitely the experience, the way that you get paid, the hourly rate is a component of your overall brand, and all of it needs to work in concert together.
That's very well said. And one of the things, just jumping back, you had mentioned, okay, what's your hourly rate? How do you figure that out? I think that goes very similar to the package pricing. Last or 2 weeks ago, you had mentioned in your AMA, make sure you develop these packages that make it easier for a client to buy from you instead of you selling to your client or a prospect. Well, it's the same thing with payments. Don't trick yourself into thinking that if I have a package, I have to give such a reduced price to encourage them to buy the package. The reality is that package pricing is a bundle of your services or your product, but it's a reflection of your costs that go into it and a reflection of your time that goes into it as well. So it is fine to discount your pricing for a package. It is not fine to bargain, barrel it, and bring it down to the bottom. The reason why is your package is still a result of some function of time or product delivery that you're going to give. Now, there's predictability to packages, right? So if somebody comes in and buys a consulting package from me, and they buy 10 hours of consulting time, I've guaranteed 10 hours of revenue. So I've got the luxury of backing off my prices a little bit because I don't have to hunt down the next customer for the next hour, because I've got 9 hours ahead of that I know I've got time to go get the next customer. So it all goes to the experience that you were saying. If I say my hourly rate is $200, but for a package I'm going to offer it at $50 an hour, I've created this really large disconnect. I'm no longer premium pricing, I'm low-end pricing, and the answer is my clients know how to manipulate that. Instead of reserving an hour of my time, they should buy a package of my time and end up getting such a dirt cheap price that it's no longer a value for me to provide that value to them.
Got it. So let's talk about the technicality of receiving payments anyways and the resources that you can use to do that. Again, when I started my business, I set up a bank account. They had a function for accounts receivables. I didn't even know if I wanted that because I just figured, oh, they'll write me checks. And then what I really experienced as I grew my business was, again, this is a component of my brand, and my brand is one of making it easiest for my customers. So now I actually offer one-click electronic payments with credit card or bank account because I like to pay through credit card. I mean, if I can get the points, why not? Can we talk a little bit about setting up actual payment vehicles that are favorable to your business and how you should determine that?
Yeah, so, and I think you hit the nail on the head here. The best way to get paid is to make it easy for your client to pay you. What's the easiest way? It's electronic payment, credit card, ACH, some other mechanism, PayPal. There's a million of ways out there. The reality is, if the client finds it easy to pay you, they will pay you quicker. If they pay you quicker, you turn your receivable into cash, you turn your cash into your own business, you've created value for yourself. There's a cost to doing it. The cost is usually some sort of finance charge, 1%, 2%, 5%. It depends on the vehicle you're using. The reality is, if I can guarantee that your client is going to pay you, they owe you $1,000, and if they pay you with that finance charge, you're going to walk away with $980 today, or they're going to write you a check. It's going to take them a while for them to write it, then they're going to mail it to you, then you're going to cash it, you're going to wait for it to get the cleared or the hold to get cleared on your bank, and now a week and a half later you have $1,000. Is it worth $20 to you, in this example, to have your money today or tomorrow versus a week and a half from now?
Yeah, and again, I think that goes to think about what it is in your customer's shoes. I mean, not only did you create that week and a half for yourself, you made it a little bit more difficult for your customers, and when they think of who they want to work with, you can guarantee that that is a factor of their decision, who is easiest to pay. That's why actually I started doing DocuSign. I was sending out agreements to people, having them print, sign, scan, email, and then I just decided, you know what, it's worth the $10 a month to make it super easy on my clients to go ahead and get that agreement back favorably for me ASAP, but also not have to make, I mean, it's like one-click sign.
Right.
So what is that experience that you're delivering to people, even down to the way that you ask them to pay you?
And you're hitting on a really interesting point. So one of the things that my business partner and I talk about with our clients, there's two types of businesses. There are businesses that are focused on top-line revenue, which means how much money can I get in the door. Then there's our clients that are focused on bottom-line revenue. That's how much they're paying to keep that money. So I'll give you an example. If I can spend $10 a month in your DocuSign example and generate another $50, $100, $200, $500 a month because of convenience versus trying to guard that $10 from leaving my pocket, in this first example, I am much more profitable by getting more revenue in than worrying about the $10 I'm spending out. If you're a business that says, I can generate more money if I have more time to do it, this is well worth your time. Spend the money on your ACH, on your credit card, on whatever electronic tools make it easy for you and more importantly for your clients. If you're somebody that says, my number is fixed, I'm getting no more money in the door, then be very careful and guard your costs. And maybe getting paid earlier doesn't matter to you because you're getting paid the same dollar amount that year no matter how you made the experience for your customer. I would venture to say that more often than not, paying these small nuisance fees for using technology come back and pay so much larger dividends than you can imagine for your business.
Well, I think it's also a matter of, to your point earlier, like you need to consistently be thinking about alternative industries too. And so yes, in the service industry, it may be a bit more customary to pay by check and have that be a thing. But in everybody's daily life, we're so used to using mobile apps, one-click payments. I mean, my God, Amazon is the king of this. They make it so easy for you to buy something with your thumbprint that you just are compelled to buy things. Right. So think about how your customers are used to paying in other situations too, because they will use that experience of convenience when it comes into you. And if you can supersede your peers in a service industry, you're already head and shoulders above your competition, which is great.
Very, very good point.
Okay, so the last thing that I want to talk about, and this is really, this was so liberating for me this year, is Matt and I were talking about ways to scale my business, and one of his suggestions was, have you considered getting a virtual assistant? We talked about the 4-hour work week, this was ages ago. Mm-hmm. But then ultimately, he put me on to my bookkeeper, Bethany, who has been just phenomenal. And at the time, I really didn't know if I wanted to pay somebody hourly to do this, but she set up all of my QuickBooks. She's kicking out P&L statements for me. She's sending invoices. She gets to be the bad cop and chase down people, and I get to focus on what I love. She even pays my business credit card mm-hmm. and just makes sure everything is staying in the clear and that my finances are handled. For me, paying that couple $100s a month has yielded so much extra time for me to focus on pulling more clients in and doing what it is that I love. When do you think it's the right time to outsource some of this? And the trust factor, I think a lot of people are nervous to put their financial, part of their business in somebody else's hands.
And that trust, that's actually a really good point. So let me start with the trust factor. Number one, vet your bookkeeper, your virtual assistant, whoever you're using, your team of people, just like you would for an employee. Make sure you can trust them. Well, how do you trust somebody? It's credentials, it's references, it's referrals, it's all those things that come with it. That shouldn't be too hard to do. So once you get past that obstacle of vetting them and trusting them, the question is, when should you do the process? As early as possible. And a lot of people mistake as early as possible as taking it out of their hands and giving it to somebody else. What I propose is not take it away from you and completely give it to somebody else. You give it to them to do the grunt work. That person is trained to do that efficiently, so that hourly rate that they're charging you, it's not going to be too painful because this is what they do.
Oh, she's fast.
In your business, you are fantastic at marketing and branding. Well, accounting in your own words, that's not your strength. If you're spending an hour doing accounting, imagine how much more marketing and branding consulting you could do for your clients. So I tell people, as early as you can, get it out of your hands and put it into a team of trusted people, whether that's your CPA, whether that's your bookkeeper, whether it's a virtual assistant, whether it's somebody in your office who's capable of doing that work. The key to that is when you give that job away, that doesn't take your responsibility away. So it's important that you, whether it's weekly or monthly, you're checking over your own numbers. You need to know the numbers of your business, no matter who else is touching your financials. So whether it's your accountant touching it, whether it's your assistant, whether it's your bookkeeper, give them the grunt work, but you should read through your financials on a regular basis to understand your business. And that's going to take away some of that fear factor, because you're going to know right away, month one, when I get that information back from my bookkeeper, if I don't understand what's going on, then there needs to be a conversation. And most likely that bookkeeper is going to explain to you what's going on, and you're going to then learn even more about your business than you thought. So not only are you paying somebody to do the grunt work for you, but you're paying for an education. So there's so much value to it. The key is only give them a task that you're comfortable with them messing up first. And are they really going to mess up? Probably not. But if you give them everything and they mess up, you put your business at risk. If you give them a small task, they pass that task, you give them something more, eventually you're going to find them, like in your situation, giving them almost everything that you do. And that is going to free up so much time, it's going to be invaluable for quantifying the actual value of what they do.
I love it. She even helps me. I mean, I really have systems in place now, and it's a typed out 20-step system of how to onboard a client. And step 17 is Bethany sends the invoice, once the agreement is signed, and she collects payment, and it's great. So she even handles that aspect of it. It's fantastic.
That's great.
So before we dive into, do we have questions that are posed? Okay, so we'll go ahead and wrap it up. Any closing words for setting up payment structures, getting paid, creating efficiencies with payments that you want to leave people with?
So one thought, and we talked about technology. The big thing here is take away the technology. The most important thing you need to do is get a piece of paper and a pencil and write down your hours that you're working if you're hourly. Write down your non-negotiables and your negotiables and figure out how to be disciplined. So yes, the technology will make you do it better, but grassroots, get down and figure out what you want to do for your business, how you're going to do it, how you want to get paid, and put it all on paper. Once you figure that out, your advisory team, your friends, your family can help you figure out a good way to do it. But if you don't know where you're starting, you're never going to get to where you want to finish.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for being on the show today. I'm so excited. You can connect with Matt on Facebook or LinkedIn, and I'll be posting both of his contact points and his email address later on today if you want to reach out to him. He's amazing. I've been working with him since the onset of my business. I can't say enough great things about him. And really, thank you so much for being on the show.
Happy to be here.
Awesome. All right, guys, have a wonderful Tuesday, and we will see you next week. Next week is creating efficiencies with the actual workflow of engagements. So making systems so there's consistencies to the work that you deliver, tracking your time, that's a big part of it, and writing down every single step so you can really get the services that you deliver down to a predictable model so you can take on more business. So don't miss that one. It's next Tuesday, same time, 9 a.m., December 27th, and I will see you guys then. Bye.